left him face to face with a group of gray ETs. He is a former White House Air Force One engineer for ABC News in Washington and a contract photographer at National Geographic. And he is our guest tonight. So everybody, please welcome Wilbur Allen. Wilbur, welcome to Late Night in the Midlands, and thank you so much for taking time out to be with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I've been looking through a lot of the photos and a lot of the different information that you have on your website and all those different links, and I'll tell you, fascinating stuff. And maybe we could start out, Wilbur, with you telling us a little more about you and what drove you in this direction.
I started having visitations as a child. My father was in the military, and I lived on military bases around the world. And when I was 5, I lived on a base in England called Sculthorpe. And one morning I woke up, and as I was awakened, the door to my room burst open, and in walked a group of small gray extraterrestrials, or about maybe 3 to 4 feet tall, in silver spacesuits. And they visited me constantly. And my work essentially is the result of alien visitation.
Amazing. So now they were in spacesuits, you say. So when people report seeing grays, I mean, is that what they're seeing? Actual little, I guess, extraterrestrials in spacesuits?
I'm not really sure what other people are seeing, but at the time I had these encounters, which was in the early 60s. It was consistent with the extraterrestrials that were recovered in the 1940s during a crash in New Mexico, in which 3 saucers came down, and those 3 saucers, when they came down, had occupants, and the occupants that were inside them were described as small gray ETs with silver spacesuits, and it was 100% consistent with those that came down in the 40s.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, you say they came into your room when you were a child. Did they try to, I mean, you had to have been scared. Did they try to like comfort you in any way to keep you calm, or did they not care?
They didn't care. It was interesting that at that time, and as a child, I didn't understand exactly what was happening to me, but at that time, what they had done was, and in most cases, they apply a dampening field to the cerebral cortex of a human, and most of us are electrical impulse organisms, at least I hope we are. And when they dampen that electrical impulse, which is sent through the brain to the rest of the body, it inhibits the body from functioning, and that's how they incapacitate most people. But in this case, in that early morning when that did happen to me, it seemed like it only worked partially because I could see them. I couldn't respond because my vocal cords were inhibited, and my legs no longer functioned, but they were nevertheless bending on me in my room.
Wow. Now, did this reoccur? I mean, this is something that continued?
It continued at almost all of the Air Force bases I lived at when I was a kid. And, I mean, I lived on many bases. And it was interesting that in all of the bases that I lived at, what would appear in my room would be exactly the same as what appeared in my room as a child when I was 5 in England. Small gray ETs with spacesuits.
So did you ever get so used to it, maybe to a point where you were no longer scared and maybe, I don't know, maybe angry about what they're doing to you?
I got used to it over a period of time. They had put something in me when I was smaller, when I had first contact in England, and that whatever it was they put inside me, my body started reacting with it, and my body essentially was trying to reject that which they implanted in me, and I vomited nightly for about 15 years. And when the vomiting stopped, I started noticing abstract events would take place. I would go places, and essentially I would be someplace and time would stop, as if somebody hit a pause button and everything was in freeze action. And then it would reanimate itself after a few seconds. Just very unusual events would transpire after the vomiting stopped.
That's fascinating. Hey, Wilbur, are you? Do you have another line, or are you on a cell phone? Because you're coming in a little muffled.
I'm on a cell phone. And so let me try this. Let me turn off my Bluetooth and let me try to go without the Bluetooth.
Okay.
Hopefully this might sound better.
Oh, that is much better. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. Now, you say that they actually put an implant in you, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, how did you know about the implant? When did you realize that there was some foreign object that was implanted in you?
Well, after about 2 weeks after the event, I started vomiting, and the vomiting didn't stop. It was nightly for about 15 years, and the military doctors at that time didn't have necessarily CAT scan technology because we're talking the early 60s. And in their assessment and looking over my body, they found absolutely nothing, but the vomiting continued nevertheless, and they never could come up with a medical reason for the nightly vomits.
Mm-hmm. So now, where is this actually located? I mean, do you know where the implant is?
It's inside my head. It's in a cavity behind the ear.
Oh. Have you ever tried to remove it or get X-rays?
It's not something that would be feasible because as I grew older and as this thing started to adhere to my body, my cells started to grow around it, and it is embedded within my tissue.
Oh, okay. So now tell me a little more about your implant. Like, well, we know where it's located, but maybe like, what is its purpose? I mean, are there signals of any kind that are being transmitted through it?
I would assume that it's a transponder of sorts, because if you look at the material that I have on my website, most of the objects that I'm able to image essentially land in front of me. So with that in mind, I would conclude that based on what I have inside me, these things are homing in on it, and they essentially manifest wherever I go. And I finished shooting in Sedona with the BBC on a project, and while we filmed, we essentially were using cameras that would take video of the area, and things didn't really happen until I got back to the hotel. And it's really interesting that the footage that I was able to obtain while filming there clearly indicated that whatever these objects are entering into the airspace undetected by the use of what my associate, Dr. Mitchell, Edgar Mitchell, was a lunar excursion module pilot for Apollo 14, indicated that most extraterrestrial technology is utilizing a wormhole type method of transportation, which enables them to come into our airspace undetected.
Oh, I see. So then, do you think that the implant is a way of tracking you or communicating in any way?
I think it goes both ways. It lets me know when things are going down, and one of the things I found very interesting is on an expedition I did with Country Music Channel, which I filmed with Big Redneck Vacation. We filmed in Area 51. And while we were there filming, the crew was essentially filming us, but I was filming the airspace, and the airspace indicated that there were two objects in the air which had characteristics were unlike any known aircraft that I'd ever photographed, and that the objects I imaged in Area 51 slithered like snakes. But whatever those objects were, they essentially, based on my research, followed me to all of the locations that I filmed at. And now that I'm here in Washington, D.C., I'm imaging the objects that I imaged in Area 51 over my home.
That's fascinating. And these sightings of these objects, I mean, this is worldwide, correct?
Yeah, it's consistent. I noticed on an object that I photographed in Shreveport while filming with Big Redneck Vacation, this object, which was consistent with video footage that was taken in Japan, 5 days later showed exactly the same footage. In fact, if you looked at my footage and you looked at the footage filmed in Japan, you think it's the same piece of footage, but it is essentially footage taken in different locations showing the exact same object. So we have matching samples which show various objects taken in various parts of the world that are consistent with objects that I photographed here in Washington, D.C., and objects that I photographed in Sedona and Area 51.
Amazing. Now, what do you think they're doing? I mean, why are they visiting? I mean, because it seems like they play this game of hide and seek. Like I've had five
it's interesting. Based on the footage,
own.
they are essentially doing hide and seek because my video shows objects materialize where there were no objects, and then it shows objects fly through the frame, then dematerialize into nothing. And, with that in mind, it clearly indicates they have access to our airspace without being detected because we don't have a technology which would enable us to track that level of technology as it appears. And, most UFO reports, if you look at most reports that are reported by radar installations, for example, they'll report a blip on the radar scope and the object will fly through the scope and then vanish. Well, my video indicates that these objects appear, become solid, fly through, and then when they're finished, whatever their mission is, they disappear as they materialize into the airspace. So, it's without a doubt that we're being visited, and the samples that I was able to obtain clearly indicate that that is indeed the case.
Oh, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind at all that we're being visited. I've had 5 sightings of my own throughout my life, and they're true. It's amazing. I mean, 3 of them, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, now you see it, now you don't. And I know I'm not crazy.
It becomes kind of abstract when essentially, and especially based on the type of research that I'm doing, I'm able to obtain the same photographs, essentially, of the same objects every night. And with that in mind, it would make you become a bit apprehensive in a sense that if I'm able to image these objects nightly, then I'm quite sure they're showing up on radar, but yet people around here act like nothing's going on.
And I'll tell you, Wilbur, I think that the skies are full of them, just like you said, and we don't see them because I'll go out at night and star watch, and I'll catch something lit up out of the corner of my eye, and I look, and it ain't there. And it's almost like it goes a certain angle where, they know they can't be seen. I don't know how they get out of it.
It's higher order technology, and we have to consider that we're existing at a certain level of vibration, and these exist at a higher level of vibration, and we're just not able to, in some cases, able to see or comprehend that which manifests in front of us. So, with higher levels of technology, and I'm using a D4 Nikon, it's a very sophisticated camera. I'm able to capture these objects at higher ISOs, like 50,000 ISO, where essentially most people wouldn't be able to see them.
That's fascinating. I've seen some pretty interesting videos on YouTube. People have used these night vision goggles, and they'll look up into the sky, and you can see all these objects flying around up there. And they're not
at a light level that's not perceivable by the human eye, and that indeed would be the case. But I'm using the technology that's slightly different than that green night vision. There's full color night vision, and that full color night vision is essentially our cameras that are able to shoot at higher ISOs. The D4 shoots at 204,800 ISO, which is extraordinary. It gives me the same light gathering capabilities essentially as a Hubble telescope that's in space. So with that in mind, with that level of light sensitivity, it's able to see these objects which are not perceptible to the eye. So with that in mind, if they're there and we can't see them, then obviously we're not going to react as if we're being encroached upon by extraterrestrials. We're just responding to that which we don't see. And if we don't see it, we don't respond to it. And that's basically what's happening here.
Absolutely. Now, what's curious to me is how they enter the room, like they came into your room, and I've talked to so many abductees who have talked about these beings just walking through the wall. I mean, how do they do such a thing?
Well, I've got to say, I saw for the first time this film called Dark Skies, and it is, in my opinion, exactly like what I encountered, except what I encountered as a child was a group of them, not just one or two that would show up as the movie portrayed in Dark Skies. But it's interesting that once they tag you, so to speak, that you're constantly monitored, and it's non-ending. It's been now almost 50 years that I've had these encounters.
Well, it must get to a point where I know you've got to just want the answers. You want to know why, why you? I mean, have you ever given that any thought? Why you?
Actually, I went beyond that. I think I stopped the why me in about third grade, and it's just now I accept what happens to me, and I'm amazed by it, because in most cases what I experience is definitely abstract, to say the least, and that the only thing that I can describe in some instances what I've experienced would be comparable to scenes of Star Trek or scenes from The Outer Limits. I mean, it's exactly the same.
I see. I want to go back to the implant just a little bit here, because I've talked to others who have said that they I don't know how to say it. It's not that they actually hear voices, but they hear voices. Some are distorted, some are not.
It's almost like a radio frequency, a transmission that's sent to you, and you hear it. And, you know, it's interesting. How do I tell people, okay, something said to go outside and take pictures, and when I go outside and take pictures and I get the samples that I get, how do I explain that to people? And here's the physical sample of it. My website is proof of that. All the samples I have are close proximity, and I'm instructed to do these, take these pictures.
That's fact. Now, does it come across more like a thought, right? I mean, it's not like you're actually hearing it, but
it's a thought, exactly.
That's fascinating. That is, and please give out the website as well, so listeners can
my website's
go check it out.
UFODC.com. UFODC.com. There are 15 chapters there, and each chapter is extraordinary. It's definitely worth the time it takes to look into each physical sample that I'm able to document.
Okay, so then you would probably be fair to say that they're not only tracking you, but contacting you.
Yes, they communicated with me. It was even more abstract while I filmed with Big Redneck Vacation in Area 51, that whatever the objects were that were in the sky above my head, they communicated with me telepathically and told me to get out of there, and I did. And as they told me to leave, and if you look at Big Redneck Vacation in the Area 51 sequence, when the police and the military personnel descended upon us, that's when everything went down. They told me to leave before it was going to happen. They were warning me to get out of there.
Well, so now, are you able to communicate back when they're communicating to you, or do they just ignore what you say and just make sure you hear what they say?
Well, based on the samples I obtained in Area 51, I set up my video camera at the hotel that I stayed in, which was in Elma, Nevada, and I made a command, and I sent this thought out, okay, show yourself to me, and within 10 seconds of making that command, verbally, the object materialized on video.
You know, I gotta say, Wilbur, I've kind of lucked out like that twice, where I would go outside, and my wife can attest to it, and I'll look up and I'll say, why don't you show yourself to me? And on 2 occasions, after I said that, seconds later, I had my sighting.
It does indeed. They are responding to your thoughts, and that's because they're reading your mind. And, you know, I know that for a fact based on the experiences and based on those things that I'm able to document photographically, that is indeed the case.
Wow. So, again, do you have any idea what they may want? I mean, have they ever told you why they're doing this?
You know, I can't answer that, and I've been asked on many shows about that in very same manner in which you asked, and I can't answer that. Only that I can show you the physical samples that they do indeed exist. What their intentions are, what their motivations are, I can't answer any of that, other than they're here and here's what they look like, you know.
Now, when you say physical samples, do you mean physical samples of what?
Photographic evidence.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, yeah.
And we're talking forensic in this case because, you know, generally speaking, when a person takes a photograph of these things or video of these things, it's not necessarily the type of quality that you would see that would be worthy of scientific analysis. That's not the case with what I'm imaging with the technology that I'm using.
You know, I just wish one time that when they do abduct somebody, you know, it seems like they make sure that when you leave, you're not bringing anything back with you, you know?
Well, that's most of the cases, but like from what I've been experiencing, I'm going into the desert, and when I come back out of the desert, pieces of me are not there. So, you know, we have to look at that. And indeed, that was the case when I was in my first expedition in Sedona. I went into the desert, and something appeared over my head, which I imaged as it dropped out of warp. On these Star Trek terms, it dropped out of warp, slowed down, and discharged other objects into the air as it was slowing down. And as this thing came out of the sky and slowed down, all the dogs and coyotes in the desert started howling. When that went down, it was my cue to leave, and I left. But I got the physical samples that clearly indicated that that was indeed what transpired based on the physical photographic evidence that I obtained in the desert.
Wow. So dogs and coyotes start howling. That would tell me that they picked up something we can't hear.
That was indeed the case, and when that was happening, the camera was rolling, and what it captured as that was going down was truly extraordinary. And it's interesting that as we were filming, well, there were several shows I filmed for in location in Sedona. On the second thing I filmed with on the BBC, I came across a retired CIA agent who is now living in the Sedona area, and he showed me a piece of photographic evidence that his video cameras filmed based on the roof of his home in the desert in Sedona, and the photographic evidence that he obtained in the year 2000 on video was consistent with what dropped out of warp in 2002 that I just described to you, that was discharging objects into the sky. And it was interesting that as it was slowing down, there's this place called the Bradshaw Ranch, and there's a tunnel which is connected from the Bradshaw Ranch to Area 51 that this object would just happen to stop over the Bradshaw Ranch, and that's where the research we conducted a few weeks ago did take place.
Fascinating. You know, I've had some come to me, some women who have testified that they've been abducted and that they've been chosen to give birth to hybrid babies and things like that. So I wonder, did you notice any other human beings or anything like that when they abducted?
It's interesting you would mention that. I had an encounter at U.S. Capitol Building July 16, 2002, and shortly after that encounter, I awoke. I wasn't in my bed and I wasn't at home, and what I think I saw, were humans with large heads that looked like combinations of human beings and grays mixed. And that, you know, I'm periodically monitored by these abstract beings, and that I believe that they were consistent with the entities I encountered as a child, except more modified with all of the research that they've done with all the people they've examined. Obviously, they have breeded with us.
I see. That's very, very interesting. Wilbur, hang on with us for a moment. We've got to take a break. And when we come back, I've definitely got some more questions for you. Fascinating information here. And we'll take calls as well. 347-989-1012. You got to press 1. So we know you want on the air because we get quite a few who listen on the phone lines. You can call in using Skype as well. My guest, Wilbur Allen. He has got not only a fascinating story, but a whole lot of evidence to back it up. I mean, you got to check out his website. Just so many pictures of these things. And I mean, you might be able to deny one, deny two. You can't deny them all. We're being visited, folks, and they're abducting people. This is Late Night in the Midlands, and I'm Michael Vera. We'll be right back. I believe it's a real phenomena. I know some people don't believe it, don't want to believe it, but I do. I do believe it. I believe it 100% that it's happening. You can speculate on all the rest of it, but I believe it's happening. I mean, you look at a guy like Travis Walton, who took, 3 or 4 lie detector tests, and not just him, but all the guys who were with him, and they all passed. I mean, you know, something like that, I mean, it stands up. And then our guest tonight, Wilbur, he's got so many pictures of these crafts, it's not funny. And we're going to get back to it. LateNightInTheMidlands.com. Go on over, become a member, be informed, and inform others. And one more time, 347-989-1012. You got to press 1 so we know you want on the air. You can call in using Skype. And we'll start taking calls in just a few minutes. So please be patient and bear with us. Wilbur, we are back, and I'm curious, when they took you, what happened? I mean, where did they bring you, and how did they do it? I mean, did they transport you, or, I mean, how did
they are indeed using Star Trek-style transporter technology, and they have the ability to go between solid objects and in space, especially based on my physical samples. I've had samples taken at the U.S. Capitol building of objects which came out of the ground, and they were small. And when I say small, maybe the size of insects. And when you look at the footage, the insects are flying through solid statues and coming out the other side. So how is that possible, other than they have the ability to transcend matter? So we're dealing with a higher order intelligence here, and we can't possibly think of aliens as we're being fed to believe they are, especially with some of the films that are on the market, Star Wars and Close Encounters and Star Trek and all these things that are out there right now. It is just not like that at all.
I see. Now, I'm going to ask you the question because I know it comes up a lot with people who will ask, how can you be sure that it's not the government who is actually coming and abducting people and making them believe they're being abducted by aliens? So I'll throw that question at you because I know it's going to come up.
Well, I got to answer that, first of all, not unless the government's got technology that enables them to do the things that I experienced. I would say it is highly unlikely that this is human technology. And we're talking about events that took place in the 60s. And what I'm describing in the 60s could easily be advanced technology that possibly we could come up with maybe in the next 100, 200 years from now, but definitely not something that would be the United States government. Impossible. If it is, it's alien technology they experimented with, that they obtained through various crashes and things that come down out of the sky, you know.
And, you know, my argument with that is, you know, if we had that type of technology at this point, why wouldn't we use it to you know, further the New World Order agenda? And, you know, we're at war with different countries. Why wouldn't that technology be used? And so I don't think that it's ours either. So
it's not.
I'm with you.
Hardly. It would be ludicrous to even think that we would have anything that advanced. And, you know, we want to think that, but that's hardly the case. And there's a lot of people out there that want to think that the government's into things like that. Based on what I sampled in Area 51, it is a very strong possibility that there is indeed extraterrestrial base there. And there is a very strong possibility that what was in the sky wanted what was on that base back. So, you know, I mean, we've got to look at all the options here. And what I imaged in Area 51, for me to image that and then image it again in Sedona a few weeks ago indicates to me clearly that that presence is here, and they're here now.
I see. So, you know, and there's a lot of speculation to these underground bases, and that some of them may actually be occupied by extraterrestrials. What's your take on that?
You know, if they had a base here, where would you put it? It would obviously be where we don't see, and we don't see underwater, we don't see what's underground.
Well, I see. So these things could actually be based here on this planet now, and
directly
some of the
in front
UFOs,
of you wouldn't know a thing.
Yeah, that's some fascinating stuff, and I wouldn't put it past them. You know, we hear a lot about reptilians and things like that, and how they're working with the government. But now, is this just one race of beings that you have encountered, or were there many?
You know, I as a child dealt with one specific type of entity, but based on the physical samples and based on some of the experiences that I've encountered, I would have to say that there are many types, and one of the things that was even more abstract were the non-corporeals I encountered in 2002 at the U.S. Capitol building.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, one other thing I wanted to bring up quickly is I've had a whistleblower who's come on this show, and said that there was a secret space program called Project Pegasus, and that they had teleportation technology, and that they were able to teleport, whether it be Mars or through time. Could it be that maybe ET has passed that type of technology along to certain branches of government?
It is a very strong possibility, because if you look at how we have advanced since the Roswell crash, for example, much of what we're utilizing, especially laser technology, cell phone technology, integrated circuit technology, most of those advancements happen relatively quick, comparatively speaking, compared to when that technology was harvested from Roswell. So, you know, a lot of what we're dealing with right now is alien technology.
Absolutely. Now, some have compared your case to that of Betty and Barney. Can you tell me a little bit about that, what the similarities are?
I met Kathy Martin, who was Betty Hill's niece, and Kathy just happened to have photographs taken by Betty. And photographs taken by Betty in the 60s and 70s were 100% consistent with photographs that I took at the U.S. Capitol building in 2002, which indicated to me that what I encountered in 2002 were essentially the same extraterrestrials that were encountered by Betty Hill and Barney Hill in 1962, based on her photographic evidence.
Fascinating. So does that mean that it's been the same race of beings who have been visiting us for all these years?
I would say so, especially based on the Betty Hill incident. You know, their description, Barney Hill's especially, of what he described, what he encountered as he was being analyzed by the aliens, were 100% matches to what I saw as a child. So, you know, to me, it was not just I that was having these encounters. It's just unfortunate that in those days we didn't have the technology that would enable us to document those events, and I didn't have that technology until recently, and that now I'm able to document those events with the things that transpire with me on a daily basis. A lot of people still find it hard to believe that, especially with the amount of physical data that I'm able to gather, that these events are taking place. So if they're not taking place, how am I getting these photographs?
Yeah, absolutely. Wilbur, we're gonna take a call here quick, and then I got some more questions after the call. I'd really like to hear about what you've seen at the U.S. Capitol building. So we'll get into that after this call. My screener is away at the moment, so 978 area code. You are on Late Night in the Midlands. Please start out with your first name and where you're calling from. You are on the air. 978, you're on the air.
Is that me?
That is you, yes, sir.
Damn, I didn't push anything, but I was going to call up earlier. How you doing, Michael? This is James.
Oh, hey, James. Welcome aboard.
I'm actually in my car. I was just shocked. I'm like, what? You talking to me? Actually, does he have any scoop marks on him? The scoop marks are usually made when they surround the implant and then reimplant it into his body. Does he have any scoop marks?
Actually, no. They inserted it in a soft tissue area that, as a child, when we have injuries in that area, it heals relatively quick. There's not even a scar there, but there's an impression which indicates that there is something embedded in the soft tissue.
Okay. Betty and Barney Hill mentioned a Nazi being on the ship. Did you see any presence of any Nazis on the ship?
Actually, no. All I saw were small grays. Lots of them.
Okay.
You know, I was at, just a comment here. I was at Con this weekend, you know, Michael. Debbie Tavares' husband or boyfriend actually had a picture that was taken about 3 or 4 days ago in California that showed a plane laying down a chemtrail that morphed into 2 chemtrails and then spun around each other and made like DNA picks about 100 foot along the way, and then followed by 2 breaks in the DNA. It's like they're telling us they're breaking our DNA up. This program happened after the plane went by. It'll probably be on YouTube pretty soon. Just wanted to tell it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that, James. I appreciate it, and we're getting a real bad connection with you. And it said on the board that you wanted on, and that's why I took the call. But thank you for calling. I might as well ask you that, Wilbur. Do you notice any, coalition with chemtrails and UFOs?
Well, you know, I come from an Air Force family, and, you know, I understand that JP4 and JP jet fuel, one of the byproducts, JP jet fuel, is water vapor, and that, you know, essentially what you see in aircraft that are in the upper atmosphere is the water vapor generated from the exhaust of the engines in an extremely cold environment, which generally happens when you're higher up in the sky. So I don't understand. To me, what people claim as a chemtrail is essentially aircraft exhaust, and in some cases I noticed that the aircraft exhaust dissipates differently than others, but that's primarily based on the fuel that's utilized by the jets. So I don't know about chemtrails other than it's byproduct engine exhaust, byproduct of the jet, you know. I look at it scientifically and understanding that I'm coming from an Air Force background. To me, I just cannot make any connections between engine exhaust from jets and things that happen with UFOs.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. You know, the chemtrail thing, that's a whole nother topic. And
something I'm not into. I'm just, because I come from a military background, Air Force. And Air Force means in airplanes, and airplanes leave airplane exhaust. And I've seen many of that as a kid and as an adult. So to me, it's airplane exhaust.
Okay, well, it's something that, you know, I know you got your hands filled with what you're doing now. And me, I kind of go into all different directions.
I spend my time looking at the poop coming out of a jet, you know.
All right. Tell me what you've seen at the U.S. Capitol building. Explain that to me a little bit.
I was shooting an album cover for Def Jam Records, and it was me, this artist, and the artist's manager. And we started shooting all over D.C., and the last part of the evening was about midnight, maybe 12:30 or so. We ended up at the U.S. Capitol building and at the reflection pool, and I set up my camera to start taking pictures because they wanted this album cover with the U.S. Capitol dome, and, you know, it gives it kind of this gangster feeling associated to it. But as we started shooting, the manager started saying, oh, what are those, UFOs? He kept making references to UFOs. And I'm taking pictures of this artist, focusing on artists because I need to get paid for this album cover that I just created. And in looking at the photographs, I noticed that we were indeed in the middle of a close encounter, and that the objects that I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building July 16th, 2002 were 100% consistent with the objects that were imaged in space by Apollo 7 and Apollo 11 in space. But these objects are now at the U.S. Capitol building.
That's fascinating. And again, people can go to your website. It's kind of creepy because it says
essentially that, especially with the NASA JPL footage that I used to make the comparative analysis of the objects I encountered at the Capitol, it says without a doubt that NASA knew that these were extraterrestrial objects. And based on the footage that was taken by Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong in space, that it was indeed consistent with the object that I photographed at the Capitol, that what they encountered in space were alien spacecraft. And what I encountered at the Capitol were alien spacecraft. So we know, as a fact, alien spacecraft were at the Capitol July 16, 1952 and July 16, 2002.
Okay. And we've got another call here. We've got Matt. Apparently, I don't know what the question is. Matt, welcome aboard.
Hey, Michael. Great show. Wilbur, great to have you on. Fascinating stories, fascinating perspective on the whole thing. You mentioned that you come from an aviation background, a military background.
Yes.
I was just curious, you were saying that the water vapor is now a normal byproduct of the chemtrails, but wouldn't that tend to equalize reasonably quickly with the surrounding atmosphere? And
well, that's why I was saying it's based on the type of fuel that they're using, and from what I understand, there's fuel that, one of the things that's interesting about jet fuel is they made it so that, for example, in most cases, jet fuel, the exhaust byproduct is white, and it looks like cloud matter. So when you see white coming out of a jet and you see it in the sky, it's easily equated as a cloud. So to a person, they wouldn't make any mess or ruckus about the fact that there's this pollution being generated by a jet or an aircraft in the sky because it looks like a cloud. But there is jet fuel that doesn't come out looking white, and they don't want that type of jet fuel on the market. So there's aviation people, just like there are people who have make fuels for cars. They make this jet fuel component that comes out and it generates a different colored vapor and makes it look like the clouds that are in the sky. So it's acceptable for a jet byproduct to be, being discharged as it does by jet engines.
Sure, and we've seen that a lot where these things rip across the sky and they lay down a nice white streak that's probably tailing them by, I don't know, maybe 50 miles or not even, maybe 20 miles or something like that. But the tail always seems to be dissipating at the rate at which the plane is flying across the sky. So,
well, yeah, it's interesting. It's almost as if they're in the same theory as what's called cloud seeding, when they seed clouds for controlling atmospheric conditions to generate rain, for example, for areas that are subjected to drought. So it's almost in that same vein, essentially. But it's interesting how some of the exhaust dissipates and that it spreads instead of disappearing. And usually what's supposed to happen, it's supposed to just disappear because it's water vapor. But that's not the case. It becomes this layer which prohibits people from seeing from the ground what's happening outside the atmosphere. And usually when that's the case, when there is a lot of atmospheric distortion, you can bet that there's plenty of activity going on beyond that barrier that they don't want us to see.
So
I
you're saying
that.
you think it is possible then that
it's a very, very strong possibility.
Yeah, because cloud seeding is potentially just a ruse to allow that activity
smoke
up
screen.
there.
It's a smoke screen. Essentially, that term smoke screen, it's a smoke screen.
Good term. Absolutely. Good. Perfect choice of words. So you think that may be in an effort to conceal the activity above?
I think that is indeed the case. It's interesting. I do a lot of samples, and I essentially set my cameras up on a nightly basis. And I'll note that I'll get more activity when there's a lot of clouds than when there's a clear night. And why is that? Is it because they're using the clouds to conceal their entry? And they do indeed use the clouds to conceal and observe us. So, with that being the case, why not generate a barrier of matter that looks like a cloud so that they can enter and do their thing without being observed by us? With the help of those who are seeding the sky with that material that inhibits us from seeing it.
So you're not concerned that this might be some form of terraforming or altering
I think
planet?
It's more something that's designed to obscure your vision.
Okay. So, but now you mentioned earlier that you witnessed gray suits. So that suggests that our environment is not compatible with them on a long-term basis.
Well, no. What that possibly suggests is that wherever they come from, that in their journey to Earth, that there's a very strong possibility that they're subjected to obscure radiation, which is the issues NASA has to deal with in sending astronauts to Mars, and that would possibly be one of the reasons why that they had these spacesuits on, and they are subjected to radiation just like we are.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Did you have any thought or feeling towards what their agenda is?
I could not answer that. I've not been able to answer that. All I can answer is that they're here and this is what it looks like. You know, that's basically what my duty is.
Have you ever attempted to remove the implant?
They did when I was a kid. It was more of a headache than anything, and no, nothing. Just leave it there. I enjoy actually what's happening to me. It's enjoyable. It's enlightening, essentially, you know. Most of my friends I find boring because of what I experience.
Fascinating. Well, thank you for your insight. It's been a fascinating talking to you. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for talking.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Wilbur, I've talked with Dr. Roger Lear before, and he told me about an implant that he tried to remove, and every time he would get close to it, it would move on him.
That's what happens. Not only moves, it sends this jolt to the person that it's lunged onto, or how should I say, it's assimilated onto, and that, this thing it's fused to my central nervous system, and it's using my central nervous system to send me the messages and tell me what to do, and it goes both ways. Because, look at all of the samples. I've got to say, all of it is based on the samples. Without the samples, I would sound like an insane person. But the samples clearly indicate that is indeed the case.
Yeah, I've had an interest in extraterrestrials since I was a child. And I know everybody says, I want to see one, I won't get paranoid, it won't scare me. But, the fact of the matter is, I want to see one bad, but I can't promise I won't be terrified when I do.
They would be the first one to let the load go, and it depends. You know what I mean? And I've got people, they talk all this stuff, and then when it does go down, they're the first to wimp out and be history. If you look around for them, they're gone. So, a lot of people talk this stuff, and when it happens, either they respond and say, okay, it's real, or they go in submission and say, I'm not going outside, I'm not going to talk about it, and they never talk about it again, and they don't. And there are a lot of people like that. They're afraid somebody's going to go knock on your door, and the MIBs are going to come and make you shut up, and they're going to make this neuralizer shot in front of your face, make you go blank. Nothing like that at all.
So you haven't had visits from Men in Black or been threatened in any way by anybody?
I'm a former White House Air Force One engineer. That has not happened at all.
Well, that's encouraging. See, more people need to come out and talk about this and not be so worried about being ridiculed, especially nowadays. I mean, maybe, 20 years ago, people were more hesitant to talk about this type of thing, and I think now it's really common conversation. I don't know anybody that I can't get into the UFO
It's like it. I was told at the university that I went to, and they were emphatic about it, that nobody would confirm my data, which is not the case, because it was confirmed by Apollo astronauts, which I have the samples to substantiate. They also told me to sit down and shut up because people weren't ready for it, and that is probably the case, but obviously they are ready for it because I'm still here and I'm talking about it right now. So, there's all kinds of things you're subjected to when you deal with this type of circumstances and situations. But it's different when you have the physical samples, and it's also different when the physical samples are substantiated by NASA JPL, which my samples come from NASA JPL. So I've got all of this information, and all the information clearly indicates extraterrestrial visitation has already taken place. They landed July 16, 2002 at the U.S. Capitol building, and nobody even knows about it.
Wow. So you think there's a base under there, maybe?
I know there's a base here in Washington because my samples, I live 7 blocks from the White House, and I'm getting the objects that I'm getting on a nightly basis 7 blocks from the White House. And I'm getting the same objects every night. So that says to me, and, coming from a military background, if I do the same thing, if I see the same jet every night, then obviously that jet's coming from somewhere. And here I'm getting the same anomaly every night and almost at the same angular velocity that I get it the night before. I get it every night. So it says to me that there's a base here without a doubt.
That's amazing. You know, I've been hearing a lot about supposedly there's supposed to be some kind of UFO wars going on above our skies that, you know, we don't see, or they make sure we don't see. Do you think that's possible? Do you think there's something like that going on?
I got a sample taken July 20th, 2010. July 20th was my dad's birthday. And the sample I took July 20th, 2010 showed this luminous white object with blue and red spheres that moved in tandem. They were pursuing this cloud-like anomaly. And I've got samples of this cloud-like anomaly, which seems like it's a spirit of some sort. It can be imaged, and you could see it move off and fly off as if it was as observing you, and then after it's noticed that you're observing it, it flies off, so it can be no longer in your attention span. But whatever this object was on July the 20th in 2010, this object projected a plasma beam towards this spirit-like anomaly as if it was trying to scoop it up out of the sky. And I sent the sample to Dr. McAbee, and Dr. McAbee was blown away by it.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm blown away by it, too. I've seen videos and pictures of these things apparently shooting some type of lasers.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's not a laser, because if it was laser, it would have the characteristics and property of light. But what I photographed, this thing projected a beam of light that bent like a scoop.
Huh.
Totally different than what we think.
The light.
It was light, a beam of light, and it was projected from this anomaly. So, you know, with that in mind, with that type of technology, I don't think that with the laws of physics, at least from what I understand, the laws of light and motion, that a beam of light should travel in a straight line. That was not indeed the case. What I photographed, July 20th, July 20th, 2010. It's on my website. It's all the way at the bottom.
Okay. Before our next break comes up, I kind of want to get into the whole photography thing a little bit, and tell me how you got going with photography. What got you so
Aliens
interested?
gave me that technology.
Ah. Okay. And, of course, you've taken many pictures of these objects, and you say that they actually tell you to take these pictures?
Yes.
Now, have others witnessed these sightings, too, like when you set up and took pictures?
On August the 3rd, 2008, I was with 18 people in Baltimore when orange and blue spheres landed directly in front of us. I got the pictures in high definition, along with the mothership at warp.
Yeah, you know, speaking of motherships, you know, there's been reports like the Phoenix Lights, for instance, of these big, huge ships that can only be described as motherships that, you know, and they don't try to hide. They just glide over.
It's interesting you mentioned the Phoenix Lights, because what was imaged in Phoenix was a huge triangular wing-like anomaly they said was bigger than 2 airports put together. And what came out of the sky July 16, 2002 at the U.S. Capitol, along with the green spheres, was this huge L-shaped anomaly that it cut awake in the sky. It made it look like a cookie cutter was cutting it into some cookie dough. That's what it looked like. That's how massive this thing was. Massive.
Yeah, it was, you know, and then, of course, the mayor tried to play it off, but after he got out of office, he admitted to it.
He admitted it was true, and I know I've got him as a friend on Facebook, and I showed him the samples, and the samples that I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building are 100% consistent with the Phoenix Lights. 100% consistent.
And that's what amazes me, is that it's not like they try to hide. It's like, you know, I know when I had my sightings, I could swear they knew I seen them, and they played with me, you know, in and out of the clouds.
They know that, but they know there's a bunch of dumbass people sitting there looking at it, and they're not going to say a thing. In fact, they're going to deny that it happened.
That's right. Well, not me. I got the binoculars, and I got a close-up of this thing, and it looked like something right out of the Jetsons. I mean, it was a disc-shaped object, and there was a globe on the top and a globe on the bottom.
Well, you know, we see that all of this is a reality, and we know it's real, but try to even show the picture of it to somebody who doesn't want to think that's a reality. They're going to tell you it's computer-generated graphics or Photoshop.
Yeah, and it's a shame because there are so much of that goes on that people get to where they don't believe anything. And I've seen with my own eyes.
It takes away from the validity of the actual samples with all the crap that's out there that's bogus, and people believe the bogus stuff is real. It makes for what is reality, it makes it look unreal and not acceptable. And that's what indeed the case is with the samples that I'm able to generate.
Yeah, and that's the plan too. Anytime the truth is coming out like this, they'll hire people to go out there.
Oh, yeah, they try to do that. But what's interesting, these dumbass people don't realize is that they let the cat out of the bag. NASA's had the footage out there, and most of the case of what happened during the Apollo Moon program, most of that was analog. And those people who ran that agency when the Apollo Moon program was in state, they're either retired or deceased. So that flow of information is stopped. Now NASA is in the digital age. The digital age did not include most of what transpired in the analog age. A lot of that's still sitting in a box at some warehouse somewhere. So with that information stopped, here I've got physical samples from the analog age that are consistent with the objects that I imaged in the digital age. So what does that say?
Well, again, for me, I don't have to look at a picture and decide whether it's real or not, because for me, I've seen them. I've been blessed enough to be able to have my own sightings, and I know that they're real. And I can understand how somebody who's not seen one might be a little skeptical, but at the same time, you look up into that sky, you see all that it has to offer up there, and I say it a million times, it wasn't put there to make our night sky look pretty. There's a lot going on up there.
We're absolutely bold to think that we are the only intelligence in this universe. Now think about that. That is completely, I think, egotistic, to say the least, to think, oh, I'm sentient and I'm the most intelligent, I'm God's gift to Earth. Not quite the case. Or God's gift to the universe. Not quite the case at all.
Oh, exactly. And some people have trouble with the concept that, there might actually be some beings out there who have more intelligence or are further advanced than we are. And it's obvious that they are.
That's definitely the case. And, what you're saying is we're too stupid to think that there's somebody smarter than us.
That's right. That's right. Hey, Wilbur, hold on. We've got another break coming. Get back to it now with my guest, Wilbur Allen. And tell me about some of the photographs that you have taken. And maybe we could, if we haven't done it already, we can tempt people to go over and take a look for themselves as well. But tell me about some of them and, some of the amazing photographs that you've taken.
I got to say that some of the more spectacular stuff that I imaged didn't happen until later on, but I've got to say that I'm a film photographer initially, and that some of my film samples were just absolutely spectacular, especially that from the U.S. Capitol on July 16, 2002, and from the Washington Monument, the 4th of July, 2002, 12 days earlier. And but I've got to it's almost impossible to say which are my more spectacular images because they're all spectacular to me. But the orange objects that landed in front of me in Baltimore and the 18 people that were with me, and it's interesting that the other people that were with me while the orange spheres were landing, if you call them today and ask them to describe what they saw, they can't remember. So, with the physical samples, it's interesting that along with most events, do come anomalous conditions that are associated to it, and memory loss seems to be one of the factors of encounters that people seem to have as a prevalent side effect of seeing these objects. They don't seem to want to remember, or their body or their mind chooses to selectively remove it from their thoughts. So it's hard to say in terms of which photograph, but they're all spectacular. Just go to the website and like if you're playing darts, just toss a dart onto the dartboard and let it hit wherever it hits, and just check from that point on. And whatever you go on to, it's all spectacular. It's all based on multiple samples and all high-definition imagery.
Okay, fantastic. Now, going back to your abduction, did you realize that you were abducted right from the start, or was this something that you had to remember later on?
I never forgot it because, it's usually interesting that most people who have these experiences, they forget about it, but I knew something was happening because in 1962, when I had the encounter, when I was 5, it was not like I'd seen aliens before. It was not like something I could make up. And when I went to school and tell the kids I went to class with what I saw, it was not like I could just read it out of a comic book because it just didn't exist like that. But, it's something that, if you have an experience like that, it's either, similar to shell shock when a person is subject to something that shocks them into a state of non-lucidness, essentially, where they forget something, or like shell shock, so to speak. It makes you forget, and some people would choose to forget those things because it's frightening, especially when you've never encountered an alien, and when you're face-to-face with an alien and you've never seen anything like that before, it's kind of interesting, And for me, it was kind of shell shock for the last, like when I was a child, but as it kept happening, I just got used to it. And now it's like common event. If I see something like that, I'll stand there and take a picture of it, not run,
Well, the last one that I seen, and I'm sure my listeners are probably getting sick of me telling this story, but I got to tell you, the last one I seen... You can't
stop talking about it because it happened. It's embedded in you, dude. You got to talk about it,
I know. It's fascinating. We were just doing a UFO show, and I believe my guest that night was Robert Stanley, and we were discussing...
my friend Robert.
Oh, he's great. And we were discussing...
In fact, he is my business partner and things. Robert Stanley and I have been on this now for the last 10 years, and Robert's got the icing on the cake, in my opinion. Everything that he was able to research and come up with backed everything that I photographed. So, yeah, without a doubt, Robert Stanley is one of the more profound researchers out there. Without a doubt.
Yeah, I love him because he says it like it is, and, he doesn't try to sugarcoat nothing. He puts it right out there.
No, he puts the facts out there, and that's what this is about. I'm not making anything up here. It's all about the physical data. And if we put all the physical data in front of a person, it's like leading the horse to the water and trying to make him drink. Here it is. Here's what's happening. It's up to you to believe that. If not, that is not my problem.
Oh, exactly. That's what I say to my listeners. I'm not here to twist your arm and make you believe anything.
You can't.
We're just giving you the information, and it's up to them, the listener, to look into it and decide for themselves. If you don't want to believe it, hey, you're going to be surprised one day.
Well, don't come at me and say that, oh, this is Photoshop or this is CGI. And, what bothers me the most is I taught in grad school computer CGI technology. And when people come to me and they start talking, oh, you did this in Photoshop or you did this in CGI, then I ask them, okay, if I did that in Photoshop or if I did that in CGI technology, tell me the technology that I used to do it. Now, if you're going to say something and you're going to say, okay, this is CGI, then that would mean that you have a knowledge in CGI technology, would it not?
Yeah,
but
well,
people will say, oh, Photoshop, CGI, and they're clueless about Photoshop, and they're even more clueless about CGI technology. Don't sit there and say it's CGI or Photoshop if you don't know what the hell you're talking about, and most people do that.
Oh, believe me, I've had one person who became a member of the website, and then they left, and they sent me an email and said, I heard a constant ringing during your show. You're trying to brainwash people. And I just thought it was hilarious. It's like, well, if you must know the technology then, right? I didn't get
well, there's always that Prozac moment. So, there's always people out there that, like, they talk about this stuff, and as well as I do, they're not working with a full deck. So quite naturally, you're going to think automatically, and, I had this happen to me when I start talking about UFOs and aliens, and they don't see the pictures. I'll talk about it, but they're not looking at the physical evidence. I'll talk about it, and they'll make noises like these cuckoo noises like you hear from the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson, And to me, it's kind of insulting because essentially what it's saying is they're not believing anything that I'm talking about because they think it's crazy. But the physical samples say it's not.
Well, I would say to those people then, if they really thought deep down inside that it's so crazy, why do they take an interest and take the time out to hack them?
It's also interesting that why would a person put themselves out there and say something like they have knowledge of the unknown when in reality the same person that's making these really dumbass statements couldn't program a VCR, and VCRs have been out of exposure now for the last 20 years.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right.
They're going to sit there and they're going to tell you what you're doing and tell you what you're photographing of, but yet they can't. They don't have mastery on their own physical lives themselves. So don't sit there and tell me what I'm taking pictures of if you were not there first, or don't tell me what I'm getting pictures of if you have no knowledge of that, as if you do have knowledge of it. And a lot of people want to be the one to say, well, this is a lens flare. They couldn't tell you what generates a lens flare.
Yeah, exactly.
Or theories of reflection or refraction, which are associated to lens flares. So don't sit there and tell me something and I've got knowledge of it. I'm going to grill you on it. I'm going to see if you know what you're talking about or not. And generally speaking, most people don't know what they're talking about. So, after a few questions, who's telling you a bunch of bull.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's just it. Some people say, oh, why, that's not important. Why do you cover that kind of, you should be talking about this and that. And I say to them, there's thousands of shows out there that cover all kinds of different stuff. This one here covers everything, and I don't cover something if I don't have an interest in it. I have a huge interest in UFOs, and I know they're real, and I know we're being visited, and I'm going to continue to cover it. I want the answers.
Know it's real,
I want to know.
There are those people who will say, no matter what, even after listening to this radio show, they're going to say you and I are a bunch of kooks, and that these pictures that you showed on the show are Photoshopped. Don't look at that. Or they're demons. Oh, yeah, okay, I've heard that a lot, too.
Oh, God, have I got that one so many times. Oh, they're demons. You're dealing with demons, fallen angels.
It's funny, the Vatican doesn't quite look at it like that. The Vatican has used that term as demons, but in reality, they do know that they are associated to extraterrestrials.
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think the Pope made a statement about that not long ago, didn't he?
No, they know. It's all a matter of knowledge, and there are people and factions, and the Vatican is a religious institution. It's as old as time itself, essentially. But with all of that knowledge that's stored there, and they've kept that knowledge locked away from people who they felt were not ready for it. With all that knowledge that's there. That knowledge essentially said that extraterrestrials have been here way before us, and mostly what we're reading about in these books on Sunday are aliens.
And I could agree with you on that. And I know, a lot of the religious fanatics get mad about it.
They're going to get mad. They sure are, yeah. But you know what the realities are? They're aliens.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you at all on that. I mean, I said that too. If you go back, say, even 1,500 years ago, and you go land a helicopter or fly a helicopter in the sky, they would quickly address them as gods. They would think that
exactly
they were gods.
You put a guy in a little put some balloons on him back in the 1500s, and he's got some helium, perhaps. Well, I don't know where he got it from, and he's floating. They're going to think that he's maybe a ghost. A lot of people are stupid because we're dealing with a level of technology, and even today with the way CGI is and the way the movies are with all these things that they show, they want to believe things are going to look like that, but that is not the case.
That's right. Okay, Wilbur, we've got another call. We've got Catherine, and she has an ET story that she wanted to share with us, so I'm going to let her come on. Catherine, welcome aboard.
Hi, how are you? I called before, and I was going to tell chemtrail stuff. You were talking about chemtrails before, which I think it's a bunch of different agendas going on, including they're betting on the weather, and they're dumping aluminum and barium on us and giving us Morgellons and covering stuff up that's happening because, but yeah, I have a bunch of E.T. Greys and Dracos.
Well, give us your best one.
Okay. When I was born in America, but then when I was 1, we moved to Istanbul, Turkey, and when I was 2, we moved to Berlin, Germany, and I lived there when they built the wall and attended a U.S. Army kindergarten there. And then when I was a teenager in the 70s, another family that lived there with us was visiting. And I went upstairs. I know I had this record, Jefferson Starship Blows Against the Empire, which has a lot of spacey music. And I just, no drugs or anything like that. And I just put my arm over my eyes, and all of a sudden I started going through tunnels. They were passing over me, and it felt really wonderful. I wasn't sleeping. I was seeing this, but I was like wide awake. And so I went through tunnels for a while, and then, and also it seemed to open up a time portal. And so it seemed like about maybe 20 minutes of going through tunnels. Then I saw stars. Then I arrived at a planet that seemed to be the moon. And it could have been hollow. It seemed like the sand was like half sand, half dust. Then I saw human bones being thrown, and they were bouncing differently. And then I was like amazed to be seeing what I was seeing. And I never was able to do it again. In the months afterwards, I got a bit of the return, and then every so often in meditation I would get a little bit of it, but I never was able to do it again. And so I saw human bones being thrown. I wasn't crazy that it was human bones, but, I was amazed to be seeing what I was seeing. And then I came up behind this very tall being with a monk's robe, a dark color with a hood, and it had very long fingers, tall, long fingers, writing in a very big old book, like an old Bible, and it was like writing slow, and my consciousness went up to the page to try to read what it was writing. I don't know if I could read at that time. I don't even know if it was in any script. We would know. And it saw me, and it had a really horrible face. It had and it was shocked. It was shocked. It had the skin was like stretched really thin, and it had very sharp, craggly teeth like a serrated knife. And, it's just his eyes were like, ugh. And it put its thoughts directly into my mind, and it said, "What are you doing here? And I'll kill you at the same time." And as it said that, I experienced myself as a very cute little, 2 or 3 year old girl, and it hated me. It hated my race. It wanted to kill me. I never knew what this was. This happened when I was in high school, and I think I told one person about it that I remember. And then sometime after 2007, I told this woman who was a psychic about it, and she said that was a Draco. It was sending a transmission, and it didn't go through proper protocol, and I intercepted it. And, it was sloppy. It didn't go through proper protocol. I intercepted its transmission, and it was killed because of that. And so that's probably why it was in such shock and wanted to kill me. And I intuited that the bones being thrown were the people killed escaping the Berlin Wall, and probably the reason that it was so excited and didn't go through proper protocol was that, there had been so much killing in World War II in Berlin in 1945. They were fighting to the death, and, they had, children and old men, and, the Russians were killing willy-nilly, and there were mass suicides, and and it was like this was like the cherry on the cake. And what it seems, and I've heard from other people, and then somebody told me, they're not doing that anymore, but it seems as if they catch these souls in that moment of fear and shock and a bad death and, unexpected death, that they're like recycling these human souls, or that was what I intuited from it. And then I have some other ET stories if you want to hear.
Okay, well, I think we'll have to stop there because that was quite a bit. Wilbur, what do you think of that?
I was a bit taken away by it because it was a kind of abstract story. Nevertheless, I've never heard anything like that. But it's all possible. I can't not believe anything that I'm hearing these days. So, very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And, I've seen we got a few chat rooms that we open. Well, a couple. Sometimes there's a few. And, sometimes we get the religious, hardcore religious ones who, they think that if you, like we were just talking about, if you contact ET or if ET contacts you, possibly you're trading your soul for that relationship, and I don't believe in all that.
That's a bit fanatical to say the least, because that does not sound anything that would be natural. And usually we're talking about the natural progression of things and curiosity and things that happen to a person in dealing with specific events would cause them to gravitate towards that. It has nothing to do with religion at all.
And I agree, but I'll give you the question was, has our government made a pact with ETs in exchange for our souls? Now, I think they may have made
not for
a pact.
our souls, but for technology.
Yeah. Right. That's where I was going. So, yeah, I don't think anybody can take your soul away.
I don't think so. What they will trade off for your technology.
Right. Yeah, that's where I'm at with it. So, I don't know. Believe me, there was another network I used to broadcast on, and they went all holy roller on me. And when I would do my UFO shows, I'd get all kinds of hell emails. It's the devil. And I just, if you're going to think that way, then you're stopping yourself from learning what's really going on.
Well, that's correct. After seeing aliens when I was a kid, when my parents sent me to Sunday school, I went to the playground, dude. It was like, I just saw aliens. What am I going to do going to church? I mean, it's a little different when you have these actual experiences. So it can't have any religious association to it. Right,
exactly. Describe for me a little bit the beings that you encountered. I know you talked about it a little bit, but maybe in as best you can, a description of what they looked like and what did they do to you? I mean, because I've heard stories of people said that they had needles that they stuck in their eyes and all kinds of tests that they did. I mean, what was your case and what did they look like?
They did during the initial encounter in England. That's where they tagged myself, and in all of the other encounters, it was purely observation because they would show up in my room, and when I saw them there, I just went directly under the covers and kept myself concealed, even though I knew there was something out there looking at me. But it was nothing outside of that. It was more telepathic communication than anything else.
I see. So you didn't actually. I mean, did they have their suits on and these uniforms?
Yeah, they were like one would what they show us as grays, except these were really tiny, and I'm a child, and to me they were up. If I stood up, they were at my height, and as a 5-year-old, I would think I would be relatively small. And they all had spacesuits on. I mean, that was totally different than what they show on television as these new clone gray things that they have as grays. What I saw had spacesuits on. They were dressed.
And there's been, I asked because there's been speculation with some people that possibly what some of this, I don't know, chemtrails in the sky type thing could be is like changing the environment to fit these extraterrestrials. Kind of transforming.
That's possible, but then too, when you look at things, if that was the case, then they would have to do it at a much grander scale than an area. And usually they talk about areas that are being coated with these chemtrails. If that was the case and they were terraforming a planet, it would be impossible to terraform just a specific area. It's impossible because it would have to be a progressively more evasive procedure to terraform an area which would have to include everything around it. You just can't do a specific area and say, I'm going to change this area and make this for aliens only. That's not logical.
Yeah, you don't get your own smoking room.
It's not like, it doesn't make sense when people come up with these concepts and what they call conspiracies. It's like, when you think about it, either they forgot to take their medications or they just took a couple hits of some crystal meth. I don't know what the hell the deal is here. But it's definitely not something that's thought of. It's not something that's logically put together with someone with some intelligence.
Well, I could see your point, but then if you add in all the things that they're allowing to happen, like Fukushima, for instance, I mean, what can you imagine what's going to happen in the future with things like that? So, you got to wonder as to why they, haven't concreted this thing in yet. Why they're
not talking about the Fukushima UFOs either.
Oh, no, they're not. Do tell.
Well, there was footage directly after that disaster, and it showed small spheres, maybe the size of bowling balls, ascending upon the reactor.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. Now, I've heard something about it, but I haven't seen any pictures, although I've been told they're out there.
It was up there for a minute. You'd have to look for it if they haven't pulled it down by now. But, yeah, there was samples up there that showed these small spheres, and the spheres were consistent with the spheres that I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building, except they weren't luminous green. These things were black or like muted metal of some sort.
So for them to do this, it'd probably be all speculation at this point, but what type of power source could they be using?
Nuclear.
What's that?
Nuclear. It has to be nuclear. When you think about it, anything that would generate enough power to generate a anti-gravity field for their propulsion technology, which is anti-gravity technology, then would have to be nuclear.
Really? And there have been cases of people who gotten close to UFOs and then had radiation burns on them.
Exactly,
so
because it's nuclear.
That's pretty fabulous when you think about it, that they'd be using a power source that we have right now.
Well, yeah, but not like what we have right now. It's more refined, more thought of. Because, see, what we're dealing with, we're actually clueless with nuclear energy, and that's obviously the case in Fukushima.
Oh, yeah.
So, with that in mind, here these extraterrestrials have small nuclear reactors sufficient to generate a magnetic field to generate propulsion for their ships. That's logical. We're yet to generate a nuclear-powered aircraft. We've got nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. We've got everything else nuclear-powered but aircraft.
Yeah, that's that we know of. Yeah, you're right. Now, we talked earlier about possibly some of these UFOs coming from underground bases, and that would actually indicate that the government has to be aware of this.
Oh, they know about it. It probably gave them the lease.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't doubt it.
Think about it. What I photographed in Area 51, how is it I got pictures of the same thing in Sedona, which is thousands of miles away, even though there's a base, a tunnel connecting the two locations to Area 51? How is that possible?
I know. And then that goes with things like the pyramids, too. How is it possible that there's pyramids all over the planet, but yet they claim that they didn't have any technology. I think somebody was helping.
Exactly, yeah, and it's milled to precision with technology that we don't even have today, and we're in the technological age. So how is that possible other than it was extraterrestrial?
Absolutely. Now, another question before, well, we got a few minutes before the break, so I'll get into it. Do you think that they're trying to give us a message of some sort? You know, because, again, the hide and seek, I mean, are they trying to inform us about something, or
they're
or do you think
informing me. I don't know about everybody else because I'm getting on a daily basis, and I at least show my materials on a daily basis, but what happens to the information once it's out there? Nothing. You know, I mean, it's out there. See it. You can see for yourself. It's on my website, ufodc.com. Nothing.
Do you see these objects, like when you see them in your camera, if you take your eye away from the camera, you can't see them?
I'll go up, and I've had situations where while I was setting up my camera, I would see an object which I thought to be a star, and as I looked and watched, it vanished. You know that's not a star, but they fake like they're stars. And you think there's a star up there, but that's not a star.
Oh, you know, you're so right. I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many nights I'm up there looking, and I swear I see a star moving. I mean, it's moving. As soon as I focus in on it, it's like it stays in place. And I'm thinking,
exactly.
I don't remember that one.
I've had samples taken in Area 51 and in Sedona, which showed clear star field, clear sky, and then objects suddenly materialize. Like suddenly. That's no meteor. And it's controlled. It's got a controlled trajectory associated to it. That's no meteor. And then, or objects that would fly through and then vanish. Where did it go?
Now that's what happened with me. I got done with my show with Robert Stanley, and after the show I did what I normally do. I went outside, and I actually figured I'd take some garbage out to the dumpster. And I did that, and I'm walking back to my front door, and out of the corner of my eye, I'm looking over into the thunderstorms. We were just talking about how a lot of these UFOs sometimes are attracted to these electrical storms, it seems. Well, there was an electrical storm.
Yes.
I bet they do. And I looked up out of the corner of my eye. I seen something, and when I looked up, huge tubular objects, glowing orange. They were moving probably only a couple 100 miles an hour in the air. I mean, they were just like they didn't care. They knew I seen them and didn't care and just floated by, and there was 4 of them in formation, and they had like a white light coming out of the back, absolutely no sound. And to this day, I don't know if it was one huge object or if it was 4, but it looked like 4 tubes in a military-type formation, just sliding across.
They are in formation of sorts, and they do have this characteristic associated to them where they could be in multiple positions at the same time. The sample I have at the U.S. Capitol building was 4 luminous green objects, but the photograph showed 16, and the 16 were the object as it dematerialized, rematerialized, dematerialized, rematerialized, dematerialized, rematerialized several times in the exposure as it flew through the frame. So, you know, it's almost impossible to gauge if it's one object or multiple objects.
Yeah, I mean, and this thing came out of nowhere. I mean, it wasn't there.
Nowhere.
There it was.
This video I got from Sedona a few weeks ago clearly shows that. Clearly, in high-definition footage video, objects materialize and dematerialize on video.
Oh, Wilbur, I was banging on the wall outside, and I'm yelling to my wife, Autumn, come out, you got to see this, And I tell you, it had to have been probably 80 to 100 feet in the air. I mean, it was that close. And exactly. I was running down through the property here, almost underneath this thing, you know, and I'm trying to get, I was so amazed by it. I was chasing it. And then
careful.
It just disappeared.
Next time you won't be so lucky. You might scoop you up and take you with them. That's not something you want to do if you ever see an object like that. But be observant if you do see objects. It's not like, you know, the objects that landed in front of me in Baltimore, I could touch them, but I thought about it. What would happen if I touched that? So I didn't want to go that far, but that would be something that you would have to be cautious of if you do have these encounters. You may not want to touch it.
Yeah, you know, Travis Walton, he mentioned that he thinks now that he thinks about it that they were actually trying to help him because he got underneath this thing and he got zapped. And, he, you know, his thought was they brought him on board to help him because, you know, if they just left him there might have been evidence maybe. I don't know. So that's what he says now, that he thinks that they actually brought him aboard to revive him.
You know, it was interesting that he would say something like that because what I experienced in Area 51, the aliens told me to get out of there. And the minute they sent that message and I left, this group of cars shot out of the base at Groom Lake doing about 70, 80 miles an hour. I would have been hit. So the aliens essentially helped me. They saved me from getting hit by these dumbass people coming out the base.
You don't sound like demons to me.
No, it doesn't sound like no demons driving no unmarked Ford vans with government tags.
Exactly. Now, what do your colleagues think about all this? I mean, when you first started coming out with this stuff, did they think you were crazy, or were they interested?
I've had people tell me, you know, especially at the school I went to sit down and shut up, things like that. But this is after the truth of the matter and after you do a little research and all the information does come to light. The truth of the matter was I had an extraterrestrial close encounter July 16, 2002 at the U.S. Capitol building, and I took pictures of an alien spacecraft. That's the truth of the matter. And that's substantiated by NASA Apollo 7, NASA Apollo 11 footage. And the launching of the X-ray satellite, they got footage of that with the green objects in space then also in 1990 and 1991. So NASA knows about it. It was indeed an extraterrestrial spacecraft I photographed at the U.S. Capitol building July 16, 2002.
Yeah, you know, these astronauts, I know that there's several of them who have, whether it be on the record or off the record, who have come out and said they've seen strange things up there. And I've seen video from these space shuttles that have showed, you know, objects that were almost like they were just hovering around watching them to see what they're doing.
Well, the objects they're photographing in space, how am I getting the same footage from the cameras I have here on Earth and they're getting the same footage in space? So that would say to me, okay, then what NASA gets in space and I'm getting it here on Earth, then they are indeed visiting us. So we have made that connection. That is without a doubt indeed what is happening. But why is it not being disclosed? And that's interesting that Steve Bassett would have this disclosure procedure out with all the information that's out there. Nobody yet wants to believe in any of this stuff. But the physical sample says yes. White House says there's no evidence that substantiates extraterrestrials are visiting the United States, but yet my photographs taken 7 blocks from the White House say that is indeed the case. So what's happening here?
And, you know, I think, my theory is, I think there's several reasons why they don't disclose, but I think the biggest one is probably the energy source that they don't want the people to know about, maybe.
Well, yeah, of course. You got the petroleum people here, and you notice now all of a sudden they had this big drive for electric cars. They're scrapping that because it doesn't work. It needs some kind of gasoline to charge it. So it's never going to be not dependent on gasoline. There's never going to be a completely electric car unless we go with nuclear power cells, which is not going to happen. You know, I mean, it's just Fred Flintstone technology in a new car in 2013. 2013 is still Fred Flintstone in terms of technology.
Oh, you're not kidding. And yeah, I've talked to guys who have been working on turning water into fuel, for lack of a better way of explaining it. And there's actually a guy in the Philippines who claims that he was driving a vehicle and that he was turning the water into a fuel. So, yeah, I believe these technologies exist.
Well, it's quite possible. Hydrogen is a proponent of energy source that we have to look at. And hydrogen propulsion is what these extraterrestrial spacecraft utilize for some of their extraterrestrial spacecraft applications. So, you know, I mean, we have to look at the vast opportunities of energy that's abundant to us, but we also have to look at we're still slave to gasoline.
Yeah.
And gasoline is not going to go away.
Yeah. Yeah,
Fossil
absolutely.
fuels, man. We're a fossil fuel. We are Fred Flintstone society.
Yeah, well put. I can't wait till we move into the Jetsons era.
That's
that
not
should
going
be
to
a lot.
happen anytime soon.
Well, no, not unless they actually all just come down and land and say, "Hey, we're here. Here's the blueprints."
Well,
but I don't see that happening.
But that's still not going to happen anytime soon.
All right, Wilbur, hang on. We've got one more break, and we'll take questions from the chat as well over on latenightinthemidlands.com. Just PM them to me so that I don't lose them in all the chatter, and I'll get to them. So, Wilbur, we are back, and I do have a question from the chat here. And Bear wants to know, what do you think about the Billy Meyer photos?
Honestly, I have not seen them.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I actually don't recall them myself, so if I have seen so much...
A lot of people ask me about other people's stuff, and I know I should look at other people's stuff, but I've got so much of my own that I don't have time to look at other people's stuff.
You know, I've seen so much that sometimes for me it's hard to place what goes where.
Exactly.
So then I see it again, and it's like, oh, yes, I remember that.
But I categorize those samples that I do get, that I am sent, that are consistent with the objects that I do have, and I do put them in the comparative analysis, and I do show the validity of all the samples with the samples that I do have. It's all based on a comparative analysis. And if you put one and one and one together, you do get 3. But it still is not enough to substantiate disclosure that extraterrestrials are indeed visiting our airspace on a daily basis.
And you're still taking pictures to this day, correct?
On a nightly basis.
There you go. All right. Now, I heard you, I was listening to some of the other YouTube videos and such that's out there with you, and I heard in one that you had talked about taking pictures of the sun and seeing some kind of crafts, giant crafts near the sun.
Well,
is that correct?
I would take it. I'm not sure if they were near the sun or objects that were obscured by the sun in the field of vision of the camera. So, you know, we have to, like, make that very, very carefully defined here, because what I sampled, and I'm taking pictures during the day and using video, and the camera that I have takes video at either 24 frames per second, which is motion picture sync rate, or 30 frames per second. And I can vary the shutter speed to whatever shutter speed that is appropriate for whatever I'm trying to photograph. But in this specific case, what I do is I set my camera to 1/8,000th of a second, which is the fastest shutter speed of that camera technology. And what I'm getting at 1/8,000th of a second at 30 frames per second is 30 frames taken at 8,000ths of a second, and in 1 or 2 frames in that 1 second interval would be UFOs. That's what I documented at the Bradshaw Ranch in Sedona, Arizona a few weeks ago. That is indeed the case during daylight hours. And we're out there, we're filming, we're seeing absolutely nothing, but when you slow down the video, taking the 1/8,000th of a second, you clearly see UFO activity was indeed transpiring in front of us. We didn't see it because we don't have the capability of seeing objects that are moving at that velocity.
I see. Now, in any of the times that you were taking pictures of the sun, I think you'd be a good person to ask this. We have a lot who speculate that there's another large body out there by the sun that they're calling all kinds of things. One of the names for it is Planet X. Well, it might be. Have you ever seen anything
think about
like
it.
that?
Now, when you think about things and how the Mayans disappeared and how some of these societies and cultures, which were essentially based on extraterrestrial culture, how they all of a sudden vanished. Now, when I had the close encounter at the U.S. Capitol building July 16, 2002, one of the things that was really weird to me that night was a group of people dressed like Mayans, early 1900s, so whenever the Mayan society was around, they looked exactly like Mayans from the Mayan society. They were walking around like, where the hell am I? As if they were released to society at that point, you know, and that was absolutely abstract to me.
Wow, that is fascinating. So they may have sucked them up at one point and then bring them back a little later in time?
And when they brought them back, they were intact as in state when they were taken in the early 1400s or whenever they were taken. They were brought back in the 20th century as if nothing had happened, but they're in the 20th century. And these people look like that Stevie Wonder in New York City. You know, they were looking around at skyscrapers and everything. They'd never seen anything like that before. They were completely out of place.
Wow. Now, with these beings, do you think that they're possibly interdimensional? Are they time travelers, or do you think they're actually from another star?
With the samples I got from Sedona a few weeks ago, interdimensional is definitely a possibility, and especially with what my associate, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, discussed in a lecture that we had a year or two ago, in specifically addressing extraterrestrial wormhole technology, and these aliens are using that technology to come and go into our airspace. And my video, please go to my website. In the Sedona chapter, you'll see references to National Geographic pages, which I have National Geographic pages. I'm a contract to National Geographic as a photographer, which have the videos associated to the reference files which I used to post to Nat Geo. And the reference files clearly indicated that aliens were in Sedona a few weeks ago. At least based on what my camera took the pictures of, that's the case. Aliens are here.
They are here, and you know, some speculate that they might be embedded in the government, and I wouldn't doubt it sometimes.
They're here. And UFODC.com, if those people don't seem to want to remember that, but UFODC.com is purely based on physical photographic evidence. There's nothing there that's Photoshop.
Oh, I believe it. Like I say, it's like with ghosts. You know, people say, I don't believe.
It's real.
Yeah, it is.
It's real. I've got steps taken to the cemetery with aliens and ghosts.
Oh, that's fascinating. Isn't it great to have been able to experience both and knowing for yourself?
I got the pleasure of seeing all of that. I mean, if you see aliens, you got to believe in ghosts. It's all real, and it's all interdimensional, essentially, because when we look at it, we are electrical impulse organisms, and that energy that's inside us, when the body is dead, it doesn't mean that energy is dead.
That's right. That's right. You can't destroy the energy.
You cannot.
That's what I'm told.
It's indefinite. If that is indeed the case, then what I imaged in the Carmelite Cemetery in Washington, D.C. here was paranormal or extraterrestrial, one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe a little of both.
Or both. So we have to accept the realities that, you know, it is not something that would be specifically limited to a person that has mental instabilities or what they call a crazy person. You know, I'm not a crazy person. Do my pictures say I'm crazy?
You know what? The people they call crazy are the ones that I always want to talk to first.
Well, they put me in special ed when I started talking about this when I was a kid. But now look what I have. And I want to take what I have now and take it back to those people who subjected me to unnecessary isolation, essentially. You know, what was interesting is I was talking about aliens on a military base.
Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, I've had another guest who talked about tall whites on a military base that he was on. And,
so, you know, it's all real. And you know, if I'm having those experiences and those encounters on military bases, then what does that say? I mean, either they have an interest in people with military background or they're in cahoots with the military.
I think they're in cahoots with certain branches of the military. I really do. Because how else would they get away with this?
I can say that with the base of technology that we have, I would say that it's a very strong possibility that we are indeed working with alien technology, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think so. You know, I've been told that whatever we have right now, that the military is probably 40 years ahead with technology.
Well, my dad was in PMEL, and PMEL were the lab coat guys, and you know what the lab coat guys did. And with all the stuff that my dad did in the military, and we, to this day, do not know what my father did for the U.S. military. The alien encounters that I had, my father was subjected to, but he would yet to this day, if he was alive, he would even talk about it. He kept that all a secret.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. Not even to the immediate family he didn't talk about it, huh?
All a secret.
Wow. Well, I guess when they take that oath, they take that oath to their deathbed with them, huh?
Well, yeah, my dad did some really interesting things. Like I said, he was a lab coat guy, and I heard when I was a kid, my dad and his friends talking about a crashed B-52 they found in the jungle of Vietnam, except it was intact, and the crew was inside there. They were mutilated like the cattle that were mutilated in cattle mutilations. Their eyes and genitals were removed, no blood, no crash residual, nothing but a crashed B-52 sitting in the jungle, just sitting there.
Yeah, now that's another thing. Tell me how these cattle mutilations are happening. I mean, no blood, organs missing,
Advanced surgery technology, and same thing happened to me in Sedona in 2012 while we were filming for Big Redneck Vacation. I went into the desert just to take pictures, and that's when the object dropped out of warp above my head, and the coyotes and dogs started howling. When I came back, there was a hole in my finger. But what was interesting, it had a small surface wound, but underneath the skin, you could see what looked like a perfectly drilled hole was put into my finger, as if they took a piece of meat out. I don't remember any of that, other than I ran my ass off to get out of there when I heard all those coyotes and dogs started howling. Dude, that's the last place you want to be in the desert alone at night with a camera and a tripod. I got my stuff, and I started running. And when I got back, I had this hole.
Wow. That's
pictures indicated that what came out of the sky was like an alien aircraft carrier. It was discharging ships into the air, and it stopped over the Bradshaw Ranch, which is connected to Area 51.
I just, I don't know what to say except for that it is. It's absolutely fascinating.
But that's physical data that indicates that. It's all based on evidence. And I can't sit here and tell you something that's insane. I'm talking the truth here, all based on my physical evidence.
And this is happening all around
what's happening, and we have to be aware of that. We're being visited by aliens on a daily basis.
Absolutely we are. Wilbur, we're getting near the end here, and I want to give you a chance to touch on whatever you'd like at this point. Any information you'd like to get out there, please go ahead and do so.
Channel special coming out. It should be out shortly. It was filmed by the BBC. You want to check out for sure if you want a good laugh, but it's serious. Look at the website when you get this laugh. Go to Big Redneck Vacation, Area 51 in Shreveport, the 2 episodes that I did work on. It's absolutely hilarious. That's on the market right now. If you're interested in my UFO books, you can go to Amazon.com and Google UFO Forensic Files. Overlook the negative comments on my videos, because the people who put the negative comments on my videos were those people that wanted to stop the flow of information. And here, all of a sudden, I've got astronauts confirming the data. So please buy my video, even though the video says it's crap. It's not. It's just somebody trying to disprove the validity of my research, and they did a very good job of it for a minute. But the truth of the matter is my data was absolutely valid. And UFODC.com is my website.
Okay, great. And Wilbur, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us tonight. You are a fascinating guest with fascinating experiences, and I would look so forward to
Robert
talking
Stanley
to you.
Check out Robert Stanley. Check out Robert Stanley, too. His work substantiates everything that I'm talking about.
Oh, you bet. Absolutely. So maybe next time we get you both on together. That would be great.
You should definitely get Robert and I together.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'll look forward to that then. That's something I'll be planning on doing then, because I think it would be a great night. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Let's do it a little differently. Let's try to do it on Skype and make it more cool, you know?
All right. We'll do that. Well, Wilbur, you have a great night, and I want to doubt in my mind at all that we're being visited. I've had 5 sightings of my own throughout my life, and they're true. It's amazing. I mean, 3 of them, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, you know, now you see it, now you don't. And I know I'm not crazy.
It's kind of abstract when essentially, and especially based on the type of research that I'm doing, I'm able to obtain the same photographs, essentially, of the same objects every night. And with that in mind, it would make you become a bit apprehensive in a sense that if I'm able to image these objects nightly, then I'm quite sure they're showing up on radar, but yet people around here act like nothing's going on.
And you know, I'll tell you, Wilbur, I think that the skies are full of them, just like you said, and we don't see them because I'll go out at night and star watch, and I'll catch something lit up out of the corner of my eye, and I look, and it ain't there. And it's almost like it goes a certain angle where, you know they can't be seen. I don't know how they get out of it.
It's higher order technology, and we have to consider that we're existing at a certain level of vibration, and these exist at a higher level of vibration, and we're just not able to, in some cases, able to see or comprehend that which manifests in front of us. So, you know, with higher levels of technology, and I'm using a D4 Nikon. It's a very sophisticated camera. I'm able to capture these objects at higher ISOs, like 50,000 ISO, where essentially most people wouldn't be able to see them.
That's fascinating. You know, I've seen some pretty interesting videos on YouTube. People have used these night vision goggles, and they'll look up into the sky, and you can see all these objects flying around up there. And they're not
at a light level that's not perceivable by the human eye, and you know that indeed would be the case. But I'm using the technology that's slightly different than that green night vision. There's full color night vision, and that full color night vision is essentially our cameras that are able to shoot at higher ISOs. The D4 shoots at 204,800 ISO, which is extraordinary. It gives me the same light gathering capabilities essentially as a Hubble telescope that's in space. So with that in mind, with that level of light sensitivity, it's able to see these objects which are not perceptible to the eye. So with that in mind, if they're there and we can't see them, then obviously we're not going to react as if we're being encroached upon by extraterrestrials. We're just responding to that which we don't see. And if we don't see it, we don't respond to it. And that's basically what's happening here.
Absolutely. Now, what's curious to me is how...
Is on an expedition I did with Country Music Channel, which I filmed with Big Redneck Vacation. We filmed in Area 51. And while we were there filming, the crew was essentially filming us, but I was filming the airspace, and the airspace indicated that there were 2 objects in the air which had characteristics were unlike any known aircraft that I'd ever photographed, and that the objects I imaged in Area 51 slithered like snakes. But whatever those objects were, they essentially, based on my research, followed me to all of the locations that I filmed at. And now that I'm here in Washington, D.C., I'm imaging the objects that I imaged in Area 51 over my home.
That's fascinating. And these sightings of these objects, I mean, this is worldwide. Correct?
Yeah, it's consistent. I noticed on an object that I photographed in Shreveport while filming with Big Redneck Vacation, this object, which was consistent with video footage that was taken in Japan, 5 days later, showed exactly the same footage. In fact, if you looked at my footage and you looked at the footage filmed in Japan, you think it's the same piece of footage, but it is essentially footage taken in different locations showing the exact same object. So we have matching samples which show various objects taken in various parts of the world that are consistent with objects that I photographed here in Washington, D.C., and objects that I photographed in Sedona and Area 51.
Amazing. Now, what do you think they're doing? I mean, why are they visiting? I mean, because it seems like they play this game of hide and seek. Like I've had
well, you know, it's interesting. Based on the footage, they are essentially doing hide and seek because my video shows objects materialize where there were no objects, and then it shows objects fly through the frame, then dematerialize into nothing. And, you know, with that in mind, it clearly indicates they have access to our airspace without being detected, because we don't have a technology which would enable us to track that level of technology as it appears. You know, most UFO reports, if you look at most reports that are reported by radar installations, for example, they'll report a blip on the radar scope, and the object will fly through the scope and then vanish. Well, my video indicates that these objects appear, become solid, fly through, and then when they're finished, whatever their mission is, they disappear as they materialize into the airspace. So, you know, it's without a doubt that we're being visited, and the samples that I was able to obtain clearly indicate that that is indeed the case.
Oh, I have absolutely no doubt.
It was interesting that at that time, and as a child, I didn't understand exactly what was happening to me, but at that time, what they had done was, and in most cases, they apply a dampening field to the cerebral cortex of a human, and most of us are electrical impulse organisms, at least I hope we are. And when they dampen that electrical impulse, which is sent through the brain to the rest of the body, it inhibits the body from functioning, and that's how they incapacitate most people. But in this case, in that early morning when that did happen to me, it seemed like it only worked partially because I could see them. I couldn't respond because my vocal cords were inhibited, and my legs no longer functioned, but they were nevertheless bending on me in my room.
Wow. Now, did this reoccur? I mean, this is something that continued?
It continued at almost all of the Air Force bases I lived at when I was a kid. And, I mean, I lived on many bases. And it was interesting that in all of the bases that I lived at, what would appear in my room would be exactly the same as what appeared in my room as a child when I was 5 in England. Small gray EPs with spacesuits.
So did you ever get so used to it, maybe to a point where you were no longer scared and maybe, I don't know, maybe angry about what they're doing to you?
I got used to it over a period of time. They had put something in me when I was smaller, when I had first contact in England, and that whatever it was they put inside me, my body started reacting with it, and my body essentially was trying to reject that which they implanted in me, and I vomited nightly for about 15 years. And when the vomiting stopped, I started noticing abstract events would take place. I would go places, and essentially I would be someplace and time would stop, as if somebody hit a pause button and everything was in freeze action. And then it would reanimate itself after a few seconds. Just very unusual events would transpire after the vomiting stopped.
That's fascinating. Hey, Wilbur, are you? Do you have another line, or are you on a cell phone? Because you're coming in a little muffled.
I'm on a cell phone. And let me try this. Let me turn off my Bluetooth and let me try to go without the Bluetooth.
Okay.
Hopefully this might sound better.
Oh, that is much better. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. Now, you say that they actually put an implant in you, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, I've left him face to face with a group of gray ETs. He is a former White House Air Force One engineer for ABC News in Washington and a contract photographer at National Geographic, and he is our guest tonight. So everybody, please welcome Wilbur Allen. Wilbur, welcome to Late Night in the Midlands, and thank you so much for taking time out to be with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I've been looking through a lot of the photos and a lot of the different information that you have on your website and all those different links, and I'll tell you, fascinating stuff. And maybe we could start out, Wilbur, with you telling us a little more about you and what drove you in this direction.
I started having visitations as a child. My father was in the military, and I lived on military bases around the world. And when I was 5, I lived on a base in England called Sculthorpe. And one morning I woke up, and as I was awakened, the door to my room burst open, and in walked a group of small gray extraterrestrials, or about maybe 3 to 4 feet tall, in silver spacesuits, and they visited me constantly. And my work essentially is the result of alien visitation.
Amazing. So now they were in spacesuits, you say. So when people report seeing grays, I mean, is that what they're seeing? Actual little, I guess, extraterrestrials in spacesuits?
I'm not really sure what other people are seeing, but at the time I had these encounters, which was in the early 60s, it was consistent with the extraterrestrials that were recovered in the 1940s during a crash in New Mexico, in which 3 saucers came down, and those 3 saucers, when they came down, had occupants, and the occupants that were inside them were described as small gray ETs with silver spacesuits, and it was 100% consistent with those that came down in the 40s.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, you say they came into your room when you were a child. Did they try to? I mean, you had to have been scared. Did they try to like comfort you in any way to keep you calm, or did they not care?
They did.
Now, how did you know about the implant? When did you realize that there was some foreign object that was implanted in you?
Well, after about 2 weeks after the event, I started vomiting, and the vomiting didn't stop. It was nightly for about 15 years, and the military doctors at that time didn't have necessarily CAT scan technology, because we're talking the early 60s. And in their assessment and looking over my body, they found absolutely nothing, but the vomiting continued nevertheless, and they never could come up with a medical reason for the nightly vomits.
Mm-hmm. So now, where is this actually located? I mean, do you know where the implant is?
It's inside my head. It's in a cavity behind the ear.
Oh. Have you ever tried to remove it or get X-rays or anything?
It's not something that would be feasible, because as I grew older and as this thing started to adhere to my body, my cells started to grow around it, and it is embedded within my tissue.
Oh, okay. So now tell me a little more about your implant. Like, well, we know where it's located, but maybe like, what is its purpose? I mean, are there signals of any kind that are being transmitted through it?
I would assume that it's a transponder of sorts, because if you look at the material that I have on my website, most of the objects that I'm able to image essentially land in front of me. So with that in mind, I would conclude that based on what I have inside me, these things are homing in on it, and they essentially manifest wherever I go. And I finished shooting in Sedona with the BBC on a project, and while we filmed, we essentially were using cameras that would take video of the area, and things didn't really happen until I got back to the hotel. And it's really interesting that the footage that I was able to obtain while filming there clearly indicated that whatever these objects are entering into the airspace undetected by the use of what my associate Dr. Mitchell, Edgar Mitchell, was the Lunar Excursion Module pilot for Apollo 14, indicated that most extraterrestrial technology is utilizing a wormhole type method of transportation, which enables them to come into our airspace undetected.
Oh, I see. So then, do you think that the implant is a way of tracking you, or communicating
I
in
think
any
it
way?
goes both ways. It lets me know when things are going down, and one of the things I found very interesting